So recently I posted a video about the immigration crisis that's happening at the border and in these, what they really are concentration camps, and thousands of children in these, first of all, they're in, there's a problem with the thousands of children who are coming into the country now being detained in customs and border patrols, basically jail cells. They're technically only allowed to be there for like 48 hours, 72 hours. And majority of them are there way past then. And they're supposed to be transitioned to the other concentration camps, the facilities that you all have seen pictures of in the past. So there's been a dramatic increase in migrants being detained at the border. That's a problem. And then, so the response from the Biden administration has been, one, to open more concentration camps, which is terrible. They've decided to open one of the most infamous ones that were closed during the Trump administration in Homestead, Florida, where, on top of the notoriously terrible treatment of the migrants that were in the facility, there was also a problem because it was built on a bunch of toxic waste. So it's just unsafe for anybody to live there. And I believe that they don't even allow homes to be built in that area. So it's not safe for people to be there, but Joe Biden's going to reopen one of these concentration camps in that same area. So that's the exact wrong way to go about this. And now he was in one of the very few interviews that he's done, which is a whole other thing to talk about, how Joe Biden is completely avoiding the press, answers no questions from anyone. And so he did one of the very few interviews he did was with George Stephanopoulos. He was asked about the crisis at the border. And George Stephanopoulos was like, hey, man, there's a bunch of people coming over the border. And I'll show you the clip, actually.
First of all, the idea that Joe Biden said come, because I heard the other day that they're coming because they know I'm a nice guy and I won't do what Trump did.
This.
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. They're not. The adults are being sent back. I can say quite clearly, don't come. And what we're in the process of getting set up, and it's not going to take a whole long time, is to be able to apply for asylum in place. So don't leave your town or city or community. We're going to make sure we have facilities in those cities and towns run by DHS and also accessed with HHS, Health and Human Services, to say you can apply for asylum from where you are right now. Make your case. We'll have people there to determine whether or not you are able to meet the requirement you qualify for asylum.
Yeah, so now Joe Biden is, look how the rhetoric has changed. Look how they've gone from, during the campaign, it was, oh, Trump is such a monster. Look how he's treating these children. Look how he's treating these migrants. They're just coming here for a better life, and he's treating them like these terrible criminals, and it's inhumane. And when we get there, we're going to change stuff. Joe Biden was even talking about how he's going to put a pause on deportations as soon as he gets into office. What did he do when he got into office? He's been in the White House 2 months now, 60 days. And there was no ban on deportations. In fact, he's deported, there's been record numbers of deportation. And like he said in that clip there, oh, I never told them to come here. They need to, he says, I never told them to come. In fact, don't come. Okay, so are we getting, the picture's pretty clear on what Biden's immigration policy is here. It sounds very similar to Donald Trump. We're going to open more concentration camps to indefinitely detain these migrants. And we're going to tell people not to come to the United States. We're going to tell these people who are fleeing desperate situations, whose life is on the line back in their home country, who might not be able to live in their country anymore. We're going to tell them, don't come to the United States. What is the difference between Joe Biden's immigration policy and any other right-wing conservative immigration policy? There is no difference. That's the rub. And I got a lot of shit during the campaign when I was saying I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden. There is no real difference between him and Donald Trump. And the popular refrain that I was getting was, oh, what about the kids in cages? You're such a monster. You're willing to let kids stay in cages because because Joe Biden doesn't live up to your purity test, so you're willing to let the kids stay in concentration camps. And I was always so confused by that. One, because it was Obama and Biden who originally built those cages that the kids were in. So to tell me I need to vote for the person to build the cages to what? Get rid of the cages? On logic, that makes no sense. But even further than that, his immigration policy for his entire career has been that of a conservative right-winger. It's been hostile to the people who are trying to come to this country for a better life. So on the issue of immigration, people were trying to act like this was a huge dividing line. This was a big difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And if you don't vote for Joe Biden on this one issue alone, you're immoral and you're a monster and you're supporting Donald Trump with the kids in cages. And it was just, I saw it for what it was at the time. This is just the Democrats doing what Democrats do. Oh, I feel your pain politics. Oh my gosh, it's so bad. I feel you. I understand. It hurts to see the kids in cages. But what were they actually going to do to change it? Not a goddamn thing. And so it's now that Joe Biden is in the White House, and now that he has the kids in cages, now he has record amounts of kids and migrants in concentration camps. More than Donald Trump ever had in the 4 years that he was president. Joe Biden has those people in concentration camps. And on top of that, Joe Biden is deporting record numbers of people out of the country. More than Donald Trump did at this stage in his presidency. So all the people who were going around and virtue signaling and acting like it is the humane thing to do, it's the moral thing to do, it's the righteous thing to do to go out and cast your vote for Joe Biden on the specific issue of immigration. Now they all have a fucking egg on their face and they look dumb because after they were going around browbeating people to elect a racist, segregationist, and drug warrior to fix the immigration crisis, well, now would you look at that? He's in the White House and he's making it, and the situation is getting worse. The situation is worse. So all the people who are doing all the photo ops, like AOC she's one of the worst. One of the fucking worst. All the photo ops of her standing outside the concentration camps under the Trump administration, crying, holding the fences, and all the tearful hearings in the congressional committees, and all the bold rhetoric. Oh, we need to abolish ICE. We need to abolish customs and border patrol. We need to abolish Homeland Security. Look at these human rights violations. This is a stain on our record and all that stuff. Look how quiet AOC has become on this issue since Joe Biden's been in office. I'm hearing very little talk about abolish ICE. Homeland Security is a giant human rights violation. We're keeping kids in concentration camp. Haven't heard her use the word concentration camp one goddamn time. Not once. And so it just so many people. The hypocrisy is off the charts. It's ridiculous. And so there was Kamala Harris I guess she was going somewhere. She was getting on a plane or whatever. and she was asked by reporters. She was stopped and she was asked by reporters about the kids in cages, basically, and she busts out laughing. So it's a short clip. It's about like 10, 15 seconds. I'll show you the clip and I'll come back and break it down.
Do you have plans to visit the border?
Not today. But I have before, and I'm sure I will again. Yeah.
All right, so let me make something clear. This isn't like some pearl clutching or some how dare you, ma'am, how dare you, sir, how dare you make light of the situation. It's not like, this isn't like some like pearl clutching thing that I'm trying to do here. And it's not like, oh, nitpicking and like, no. So let me get a couple things straight. I, myself, personally, I have a kind of nervous laugh. And it's something that I've had my whole life. Sometimes when I hear some shit that isn't funny, and I know that it's not funny, but the fact that I have to keep like reminding myself, don't laugh, it's not funny. And then sometimes I can't help it and I bust out laughing. That happens. It happens to a lot of people. And so like I get that. But this isn't that. And then another point I want to make, just to clarify, I'm not even one of those people who thinks that, oh, there's like any topic is off limits. It's so bad. It's so tragic that you can't make a joke out of it. I'm the exact opposite. I don't think that there isn't anything that you can't make funny. And I enjoy that. It's I've always loved comedy my entire life. Always watched stand-up comedy and like different forms of comedy. And people who make jokes out of what are normally like bad or tragic circumstances, like that's a very good skill to have in comedy. And when you can make a joke out of basically anything, I will laugh. It doesn't matter what the topic is. And yes, I could acknowledge that it's bad or whatever, but I'll laugh if it's funny because that's just a human thing. So I'm not one of those people who like, oh, you can never make a joke about this topic. I've seen people make jokes about 9/11 and our militarism and our imperialism and corruption. And it makes me laugh. I know how serious these topics are, but it makes me laugh. But that's not what this is with Kamala Harris. I've been following her. I've been following politics closely over the last 4 years. And since she's been in the Senate, her presidential campaign. So I've seen a lot of interactions with Kamala Harris. And she has this type of laughter, this nervous laughter, when she's fucking lying, she knows she's lying, and then she knows that you know she's lying, or when she has to come up with a lie or some sleazy, weaselly politician answer, but her brain just can't work fast enough, so she just does this little nervous laughter. I've seen her do it more times than I can count. And that's what this is here. So, or they ask her, so hey, when are you gonna go, you visited the border before, you visited these facilities before, concentration camps. You visited them before, so are you gonna go back now that you're vice president? And it's such a straightforward answer. And she doesn't want to answer it because she knows what's going on in these facilities. And she knows it's even worse than it was under the Trump administration. So she can't just say, I don't want to go there because everybody's like, what the fuck? And she can't just, it's hard for her to say, yes, I know it's serious, I'm going to go. Okay, why haven't you gone? So she's like, she busts out laughing and tries to make a joke out of it and deflect. So that it's a small thing, and that's not what the whole point of this video is about anyway. But I just want to make the point that look how it's different. It hits different when you're a person in power and you have some sort of authority over the situation, and you can make it so that this problem doesn't exist, or you can at least have a huge say in how this problem is solved. And instead of addressing the problem seriously, which is what you should be doing, you bust out laughing and you're very flippant about it. That's very different than a comedian or some regular ass person making a joke about the border and, you know, haha, hee hee. That person doesn't have the power to fix the problem. That people's lives aren't depending on that person fixing the problem. But that's very different for Kamala Harris here. She's a vice president. She has a lot of sway over this issue. And so look how flippant she is. And she was one of those people who was very over dramatic about the whole thing when it was Donald Trump. She wasn't cracking jokes and cutting up when it was Trump and running the concentration camps. She was serious as a fucking heart attack. She did all those photo ops going outside of the facilities and, oh my God, this is so tragic, human rights violations. She was in the committees, grandstanding and all that stuff. She was taking it as serious as a heart attack. And now that it's her, similar to, and you know, this is something that it reminds me of. When she was asked about, after Joe Biden picked her to be his vice president. And she was asked by somebody, I think it was Stephen Colbert. He was like, okay, so what about the exchange that you had with Joe Biden in one of the debates? And I'm not going to go into all the details about it. But she nailed Joe Biden's ass to the wall on segregation because he was against desegregation back when he was a senator. So she nailed his ass to the wall on the issue. Of course, she was a giant hypocrite, but still, it was one of the most memorable moments in the debates of the entire primary. So somebody asked about it, and he was like, "Oh, it looked like you really went after Joe there." She was laughing. Oh my God! It was a debate. It was a debate, and she was like making like light of the situation. She's like, "Oh, I don't really care that Joe Biden was an anti-segregationist." Or he was against, I don't care that Joe Biden was a segregationist. I don't care if he was against desegregation. It was just a debate. I was just making a point. So, like, this clip here, it had that same energy to me. Like, oh, you got me. I don't really actually care about it. I was just trying to make Trump look like an asshole. Now it's on me. Now it's on my administration. You got me. We aren't really doing anything to fix the problem either. Whoops. Like, that's how this whole thing came off to me as. And it's gross. And it's clear that the direction that the Biden administration is going with immigration, and they have no real plans to address the problem. And so, let me get into that too, because she's laughing about when she's asked about the kids in cages. And then on top of that, the Biden administration, they're continuing the same policies that are causing people to flee their countries and to try to come here for refuge. They're continuing those same disastrous policies, like the drug war. People have in the United States have a very limited perspective on what this war on drugs actually is. And they only view it from how it affects people here in the United States. And it's tragic what the drug war has done in the United States. Completely devastated communities, locked up people for absolutely no reason, ruined their lives, ruined their futures, and put them in prison, and completely changed the trajectory of people's lives. People have died in drug raids and things like that, died in prison from being arrested for drug possession and stuff like that. And subjecting people to all this state-sanctioned torture just for drugs, for the possession of drugs or selling drugs, which should not be a crime. And so the whole origins of the drug war and how it was racist from its inception, and it was meant to go after people who were critical of the government, Black people, Black activists who are critical of the government, and they needed something to criminalize them for, so they chose drugs. So, and there's a whole very sordid history of the war on drugs here in the United States, and now it's become this profit-making machine. And so that's how people view it here in the United States, the prison industrial complex, the mass incarceration, the effects that it had on poor people and people of color for generations in this country. That's how people view the drug war. But outside of the United States, it is even worse. So we've imposed this war on drugs in all these different countries in Latin America and around the world, so that now they have to enforce our dumbass, stupid, corrupt drug war. And if they don't do it, the U.S. will drop the hammer on them and use all types of tools of coercion to get back at them until they fall in line and act like a client state for the United States and carry out our policy specifically on the drug war. And so they will threaten to withhold aid to a country, desperately needed aid to a country, if the government were to legalize drugs or to not enforce the drug war and things like that. So they use all these different ways to coerce governments into doing this war on drugs. And in those countries, it's become, a lot of the time, it's a hot war. It's not just, oh, the government's kicking in doors and arresting people and ruining people's lives and things like that. It's become to the point where in some countries, the cartels are, because of the black market of the drug, because the drug war breeds a black market. The prohibition of drugs, it creates a black market. And if people are always going to need drugs. People are always going to use drugs. And that's been true for the entire history of humanity. People have smoked plants, made tea from plants, and done all types of different things to get high and basically use drugs for any number of reasons. So it's been a thing that's existed for the entirety of human existence. And so when you make it illegal, similar to how they made alcohol illegal, it doesn't make people stop using it. It makes them buy it from shady people in the black market. And so these cartels in all these different countries, Guatemala and Honduras and Nicaragua and Mexico and Venezuela and Colombia, they capitalize on this and they monopolize the black market. And instead of regular small businesses being able to open their own dispensaries or to open their own growing operations and legally sell it and have it done through the proper channels like that, it's the cartels, the people with the most money and the most guns and who are willing to use the most violence. They monopolize the industry, make billions and billions of dollars from the illicit sale of the drugs. And they get to pocket all of that to continue to build their empire. So in a lot of these countries, these cartels, they act like a shadow government. In a lot of places, they have more control over territories than the actual government does. So I remember hearing crazy stories about this years and years ago about how the cartels would literally be having shootouts with the government over territory to control territory. And you have basically, cartels are like equivalent to warlords. An authoritarian shadow government. So whatever the territory they control, they get to rule with an iron fist. They get to murder, kidnap, hold people for ransom, blackmail, extortion, all types of things. And they destabilize the country, and the government, because it's so corrupt and under-resourced, they can't even effectively push back against it. So it creates all this instability in the country, and that's why people end up having to leave. And so the drug war is a problem, but also just the regular old regime change that the U.S. has been doing in all these different countries. Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, all these different countries, Haiti. We have either covertly with the CIA or just overtly overthrown their governments, funded rebels, rigged elections, armed terrorist groups to violently overthrow the government. And we've done that. One of the most insane examples is in Ecuador, I believe it was. The U.S. or the CIA. So U.S. fruit corporations like Chiquita, they were in Ecuador and they were stealing the bananas from the locals, and they were taking it and selling it internationally and making a bunch of money off of it. And because of that, the locals, that was their cash crop. That was how they made their money. So now they don't have access to their fruits anymore because the government was allowing, was corrupt, and they were getting a piece of the action from the corporations. And so they were allowing the corporations to just basically extract all the wealth and pocket it for themselves and left the people in poverty in the country. So then somebody gets elected. I can't remember the name of the president. And then he said he's elected on running these U.S. and Western fruit companies out of Ecuador and then allowing people to sell their own crops and basically a plan to eliminate poverty in the country. Chiquita said, we're not having that shit. The U.S. oil fruit companies said, we're not having that shit. So they had the CIA assassinate the president of Ecuador. And this is all public record. This is all public record. The files have been declassified. This was back in the 50s. The CIA assassinated the president of Ecuador and imposed this military dictatorship that did genocide and a bunch and cracked down on the population, disappearing people, kidnapping people, and all those things, torture. Also that the U.S. fruit companies can continue to steal the bananas from Ecuador and sell them. And that's where the term Banana Republic comes from. It was a country, a government, and installed explicitly to steal the bananas. So we've done that dozens of times over in Latin America and around the world. And when we do that, like I said, we back these vicious military dictatorships that terrorize the communities, create all this instability, do genocides, massive human rights violations, and make the situation untenable for the people living there. And even, like I said, the example of Ecuador, yeah, that happened in the 50s, but ever since then, it's been nothing but corruption and instability in the government. And that is created these conditions that make it hard for regular people to stay in the country. And that's where you get these people fleeing from their country and coming to the U.S. to get refuge and try to look for and create a better life for themselves and for their children. And you have to understand, people would not be doing that. People would not get up out of their homes, leave their neighborhoods where they've grown up their entire lives, their family and the community. They would not do that, risk their lives on the journey if they felt like they had other options, if they thought they would be okay in their home country. But because of U.S. foreign policy, it has made it untenable for these people to stay in their country. That's why they're coming here. And then, like I said, you saw the clip of Joe Biden saying, don't come here. Even though, and it was Joe Biden. For the 40 years that he was in the Senate and in government, almost 50 years, he has played a direct role in some of these horrible policies that created these conditions in these countries. And then on top of that, he's doing even more regime change. He's still continuing the drug war. You guys, so he's still trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government. He's still pretending like Juan Guaido, he never ran for president, wasn't elected president, isn't even in government anymore. Pretending that Juan Guaido is the president of Venezuela so that they can do regime change and steal Venezuela's oil. They have the largest oil reserves on the planet. So Joe Biden is still backing the now dictator in Haiti. So there was elections. The president got voted out. He says, I'm not leaving. And he has the backing of the U.S. and Joe Biden says he stands by this person. So now there's a dictator imposed on Haiti and it's creating all this instability in the country. Joe Biden is continuing the same policies, regime change in the drug war that is the source of the immigration crisis. So, look, there is no daylight between him and Donald Trump and the Democrats and the Republicans on this issue. They're all bad. They're all shitty. So what do? First of all, we need to close all the concentration camps, and that's exactly what they are, concentration camps. We need to close all of them. And we need to give these people amnesty. They all deserve citizenship. Fuck the 10-year pathway to citizenship. Fuck the congressional approved, having legislation go through Congress. The president himself, through executive order, can grant people amnesty. And that's what needs to happen. For all the people, the over 10 million people who have lived here, most of them have lived here a lot of people have been here 5 years, 10 years, their entire lives, these immigrants, these undocumented immigrants. So they're here, a lot of them pay taxes, they contribute to society, they contribute to their community, but they live under threat of deportation at any moment. They don't get access to government services that they may need, even if they may pay taxes, because they don't have the proper paperwork. So it is insane to let them go any longer living that way, because it subjects them to a terrible kind of living situation. They can only get jobs under the table. A lot of times they can't go to school, and it's hard for them to advance in their lives and move further in their life because they're undocumented status. So give them all amnesty. Everybody who's already here, make them a citizen. And so that's the immediate situation, a solution to the problem. And people will say, oh, that's so unrealistic. We can't just give them amnesty. We can't just make them all citizens. And this is where I feel like people derail the conversation about the immediate solutions that need to take place in regards to immigration. And sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes people may not know better and subject to propaganda. I understand that. But this is where I feel the conversation gets derailed. After you say we need to give these people amnesty because the reasons that I listed before, that is no way. People should not be having to live in this country, live in the shadows like that, just because they came here for a better life for themselves, or just because they could have been 2 years old and their family came here illegally, and now they're subjected to that kind of life for the rest of their life. Nobody should have to live like that. And there's no argument to be made that anybody should have to live like that for another day longer when the president has the ability to completely grant them amnesty and make them citizens. There is no argument you can make for why there needs to be a pathway to citizenship, why it should be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or anything like that. And then people say, oh, we can't just give them amnesty. This is where the conversation gets derailed. We can't just give them amnesty because then what's going to happen? Then all these people from Guatemala and Honduras and Nicaragua and Mexico and Venezuela and Colombia, everybody's just going to come to the United States, and then what? So this is like a red herring, and it's like some hypothetical that you can't answer because it's so outlandish. And it's like, it's just a now this is where it gets from real life problems and real life solutions to hypotheticals. If this happens and that happens, then we can do this. And then when it after we grant the amnesty, whatever happens after that, that's another problem that arises. Then you figure out how to deal with that problem. But this situation is untenable. And there is precedent for this. Ronald Reagan, one of the worst presidents in modern history, he granted almost 3 million people amnesty in this country. They made them all citizens. So there's precedent for this to be done. It needs to happen now. And we need to stop the regime change. And we need to stop the drug war. And then we'll see if this country stabilizes. We'll see how many people still try to come into the country. And however many of them try to come into the country, we have a moral obligation to allow them into the country. Because we, through our policies, destabilize their countries. Let me know what you guys think about the immigration crisis. And the fact that it's even worse now under Joe Biden than it was under Donald Trump. Let me know in the comment section.